Thanks a lot, everybody. Clara Fuge. I run the product suite for P2 Energy Solutions that relates to field data capture operations, optimization, reporting, regulatory reporting, basically all aspects of day-to-day operations around production. And today I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about some of the more common sense things that operators can be doing to start looking at how they can both optimize production and increase operational efficiency. It doesn't all have to be high technology. So first of all, there are a few things that almost every unconventional player has in common. Wells come on with really high initial production. In fact, such high production that often when the drilling and completion crew is handing off to the field operations crew, all of the tanks and equipment isn't necessarily on site yet for the production to start, so they start producing into frac tanks. And there's much more wells and equipment to track. All stuff that everybody here knows, but the point is that there's more data to capture, more things to keep up with. And then the focus starts to shift to how you can put off the aggressive decline of the well. And at the same time, there's this huge focus on reducing operating costs. All of these things come into play for any unconventional well. This is not just Permian, and everybody knows all this. But there's another factor as well, which is we have a shift change. Lots less people coming into the industry, a little bit uncertain times, people less anxious to come in, a lot of people retiring. And all of this has pretty much ended up with a much higher well-to-engineer ratio. So this is not just with production engineers and reservoir engineers, but pretty much across all of the technical disciplines that manage the day-to-day operations of an oil and gas company. There's just more wells, more equipment, more things to keep up with. So that makes it a lot more challenging in an unconventional play to focus on the necessary data streams and reporting to be able to be sure that you are operating efficiently and that you're optimizing. And when you start to look at what, it's an overused term, operational silos, but in reality, there's a lot of operational silos within an E&P company. There's the field operations focused on what they have to do, getting to the well every single day. Production accounting's focused on allocating those hydrocarbons in a correct manner. Production engineers, G&G, they have their own areas and their metrics. Revenue accounting and regs have their own. All of that means that everybody's making decisions on metrics that aren't necessarily shared and doesn't necessarily lead to a focus on what's best for the asset or all of the assets. So how does that translate to some just very specific examples in the Permian? We have a lot of clients that operate in the Permian, and we have to help them with their field data capture and reporting and allocations all around these areas. Hot oiling, also known as load oil. This is an area where a lot of clients are spending time so that they can stimulate the well. Well, what's important about it is not just that you're doing it, but that when you are doing this, that you've actually accurately tracked how much of the oil has come up out of the well so that you don't over report the production. Just like gas lift, the same thing. You may be lifting and you may be using gas that's out of your own formation, or you may have bought the gas from someone else. How do you make sure that you're tracking that correctly? And that involves communication between the field and the back office. Another area where we're really surprised to see some really large and sophisticated operators are keeping track of chemicals used, whether they're using the chemicals to treat downhole or whether they're using them in tanks. They're managing all of this in spreadsheets. So you have field operators calling out for chemical treatments, chemical vendors basically sending off the chemicals, but nobody really has a real sense of whether those chemicals are working. Which one did work? How much do you have on site? How can you optimize the use of the chemical if you don't know which one you're using? Some of the other things are a little bit more simple, but just as challenging. Well tests, everybody uses those to determine the potential of a well, but what if that test isn't a good test of the well? Does it match up what you expect and what prior tests? Liquid inventory management, probably the biggest thing that we see across all unconventionals. Lots of water, lots of oil, no pipeline, lots of tanks on site, and lots of data associated and tons of transactions. Paper transactions, literally paper transactions. And then there's, of course, regulatory scrutiny. Every single time you flip a valve, if you're on federal lands, which a lot of the Permian plays are on, if you're on federal lands, the BLM wants to know every single time you flipped a valve and every time you move product. So all of those things come into play in terms of a challenge for data in operations and reporting. Of course, the most important one is well downtime. So what are some of the things that you can do to ameliorate these kind of day-to-day operational challenges, but actually turn them into things where you can actually say, we're optimizing our operations, we're optimizing our assets? Well, we look at it as automate your best engineer. Take your best engineer, your best technician, and give them the tools that they need so that they can make the decisions, so that they can start to turn things that they know about into actionable items across departments, and build what we call a digital asset. Now, what that means is you don't need to combine all of the data into one common system, but rather leverage tools that will bring data in from all the relative systems, whether it's a SCADA alerting system, whether it's a workflow system, whether it's your standard measurements, whether it's calculations, but bring them all together in a format where you can access them, and access them in a real-time manner. There's a big difference between what is known as business intelligence and operational intelligence. Business intelligence are your standard dashboards where people who are generalists may survey and look at what kind of information, how's my gross doing, how's my net doing for my production, versus what the specialists need. The specialists work in days, hours, minutes, and those you need operational intelligence tools for. And some of those tools are tools that also need to go into the hands of the people in the field. Mobility is a big thing people talk about, but mobility is a whole lot more than just putting some software on an iPhone or an iPad, but rather it's integrating mobile devices, the very same kinds of activities that field operators and foremen and superintendents and well tenders are doing right now in often grease books or laptops. Well, if you enable them with phones and they have the ability to actually communicate in a collaborative manner about the asset with people in the back office, then all of a sudden you can start to get to mitigating circumstances or get to things much faster. And a good example of the kinds of things you can get faster, this is a small one, but knowing when a tank is ready to haul may sound like a really simple thing, but knowing when a tank is ready to haul 3 days ahead of time, making sure that the right person's out there to treat the tank before you call a hauler out and before you get them to come and haul it, so that without getting a reject ticket because it's not ready. These are small common sense things, but the right software will help you get there. So it comes down to what we call essentially efficient operations. We used to look at the whole concept of the field to the back office in a very linear fashion, very sort of left to right. It all starts in the field, it all flows to the back office. The right set of software capabilities, the right mobility, the integration of SCADA will give you field operations that are much more holistic and will give you a better view into what your well is doing and what your assets as a whole is doing. Part of what we're trying to focus on is making sure that the right person has the right information at the right time to make good decisions. So a good example of that is reducing production deferment. We have over 170 clients that are using our software, and we surveyed the data of about a third of them. And what we found was that on average, these clients had about 12% of their production deferred on an annual basis. 8% of that production was unplanned downtime. So they deferred production, but 8 of it they didn't plan for. If you had the kind of systems in place where you're keeping everybody in the loop on any kind of issues associated with a well, rod pumps failing, curtailment from pipeline, anything, and you can reduce that for just a little bit, that's one way, simple way to gain operational efficiency. So, common sense doesn't necessarily need technology, I hate to say, but it certainly does help to have the right technology in place, which is a combination of real-time systems, good field operational systems, good back office systems, and the right reporting.
One question that I do have with this data, is it, you said real time, is there any delay, I guess, from the field to the iPad or to the phone or?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Obviously, if they're going to have an iPad or an iPhone, they're going to have connectivity. So the concept of absolute real-time data, a lot of people talk about being able to walk up to the pad and have some sort of magical Bluetooth connectivity. It does exist, but it's not necessarily in a format that can be easily disseminated to multiple types of software. So the challenge is that. The challenge is having some standardization that multiple softwares can integrate with.
Okay. Then another question would be just ease of use. How quickly can a field engineer get up to speed on it?
Pretty much the most important thing. If they can't self-train on the software, particularly the field operators, if they can't get up and running within less than a couple of hours, then you've given them a piece of software that's too hard to use. So specifically for the field, their focus is the equipment and the asset, not the software.